Okay, now it's time to speak like a hacker. That was my hacker slang coming in. Did you like that? These are some of the terms. That's what we want to teach you here. Some of the terms that you should be aware of. Some of them you may be aware of. Some of them you may never have heard of before. We're going to make sure you understand them. The first one is referred to as an exploit. Now, I want you to think about that one for a second. An exploit is what? Well, it's a way of circumventing security. And there are different types of exploits. It could be a software exploit. It could be an exploit based off of physical issue. Maybe they've got a card key access into a door. Well, if I just simply tailgate somebody, that's an exploit that I could implement or I could take advantage of. So an exploit is just simply a way of breaching the security of some type of system through some type of vulnerability. And we'll talk about vulnerabilities here in just a second. That's another term I want you to become familiar with. But first, I want to talk about the hack value. It's not something that, when you're sick and you hack up. Yeah, that was gross. The hack value is a value that a hacker associates to a system. Let's say that I go through and I scan your network, and in it I discover that you've got, 10 Windows 7 machines, you've got a Windows 2003 server, you've got a Windows 2012 server, you got a Linux box, and you got a couple of Macs out there too. Now, I'm going to go through as a hacker and associate a hack value, meaning which machines are going to be more advantageous for me to go after. Not that I can't get into all of them. It's always a matter of time. We'll talk about that one a little bit later on too. Time is our worst enemy when it comes to hacking or protecting ourselves from hacking. I always love it when I'd have relatives say, yeah, I went off and bought a Mac because I don't have to worry about antivirus. And I'm like, oh, man, yeah, that's it. Don't give yourself any type of protection. Just assume. And the truth behind that whole concept, that whole marketing from Apple is brilliant, by the way. But when you think about it, at the time, Apple had less than 10% of the market share. Now, pretend like you're a hacker for a second. Do you really want to go after only 10% of the systems out there? Or if you're trying to create a piece of malware, do you only want to infect 10% of the systems out there? This is why Windows typically gets a really bad rap for itself, is because the fact that they own so much of the market share, they are a primary target. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at your machines and say, okay, a Linux box, not impossible, but it may be more difficult. I'm going to maybe focus more on these Windows 7 machines, but you know what? Even easier, older technology, you got a Windows Server 2003 system sitting out there. It may not be patched, or it may not have a hotfix installed, which leads me into vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities is a weakness in the design or a weakness in the implementation of a system. Whether, again, it could be, I shouldn't just say a system, I got to come up with a good word for this one, but it's for either operating systems, hardware, applications, anything that's dealing with the IT environment. It may have a vulnerability. There are vulnerabilities on routers. There's vulnerabilities on Adobe Acrobat. There's vulnerabilities for webcams. I mean, they're everywhere. A target of evaluation. Now, what we mean by this term is some type of system, an application, a device, a component, a person that the hacker has identified as a device that requires a security evaluation. This actually, going through and listing your targets of evaluations, helps an evaluator understand all the functionality, all the vulnerabilities, all the technology that's involved in that apparatus, or that, again, it can be from system to users. So we need to go through and evaluate those. We also have what they refer to as a zero-day attack. Now, a zero-day attack is very similar. Well, this is probably the most common or known term that we use in the hacking world. A zero-day attack is an attack that a hacker can issue against a target where there's been no patch or fix deployed. So a zero-day attack doesn't necessarily have to be 0 days or just today. If Microsoft figures out 3 months from now that there's a vulnerability through one of their operating systems, until they come out with a patch, any attack that's thrown at that machine or at that particular target is referred to as a zero-day attack. So again, a zero-day attack is just simply something that hasn't been fixed, either from the developer or could be lack of training if it's a user. And finally, we have something called daisy chaining. Daisy chaining is, well, let me explain it to you, 'cause sometimes it's a little bit easier to understand if I explain it. Daisy chaining is, let's say that I come into your network and I scan your network and I see that you've got these Windows 7 machines out there, you've got some servers out there. I'm going to try to compromise one of your desktop machines. And I'm going to do Billy Bob down at the mail department, his mailroom. Do we even have mailrooms anymore? Email rooms. No, we'll go with marketing. So we're going to go through and exploit his machine, and I'm going to pwn his machine really, really bad so that I'm in total control of it. Then I'm going to use his machine to attack your servers. And I'm going to clean my tracks when it comes to making sure on his desktop machine that you can't tell I was on his machine. I really don't care that you can see that Billy Bob's machine was on your server. Because guess what's going to happen? An inexperienced IT person is going to look at the server, look at the logs, and go, oh, Billy Bob's machine's attacking me. Then they run down to Billy Bob's machine. They're like, what are you doing, Billy Bob? And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you don't. Because they look at Billy Bob's machine and there's no record. So that's daisy chaining, using one node or device to help me attack a secondary node within your environment, or multiple nodes within your environment.